Well, welcome to the meetup. So a little bit about you. You are an independent consultant, an architect, developer, trainer, and speaker. You've given talks at over 100 events across Europe and 100 developer trainings on JavaScript, TypeScript, Angular, and React and other related tech. You're the creator of ANF training. You have 3,500 participants in the training. You're a former React-oriented architect turned into an Angular enthusiast. So want to learn more about that in a second. You're also recently an Angular Dev Tools contributor. I've seen some of your tweets about that. So very cool that you're contributing to that. You're also an Angular Tech Radar co-founder and in love with the Angular community. So welcome.
Welcome, and it's my pleasure and honor to be here, so thank you. Okay, so dear everybody, I'm really excited about the technology that I'm going to talk about, which is Angular Query. And the talk is called Ultimate Server Client State Synchronization. And that's actually what Angular Query does. That is, we've got some state on the server that could be some like stored somewhere in the database. And before we can show something, display something on the client application, we need to load it. And there is a couple of issues, couple of topics that we need to take care of. For instance, by the time where we load the data from the server to the client, it might happen that this data is already outdated, that it's stale. So like if we think about data loading, just pure data loading, this could seem to be a very, very simple topic, like, you just make an HTTP GET request and there is basically nothing more. But if we think about it more deeply, then there is quite a bit of issues that we need to deal with, which is error handling, cache invalidation, how often do we refresh the data, etc., etc., and not to mention state machines that, for instance, if I'm displaying the data, my error data should be cleared up. Or if I'm during the loading, right, I probably should not be displaying the error, or I should not be displaying the data, and so on and so forth. So if we take closer look at the data loading thing, there are very similar problems on very different pages, but all this error handling, cache invalidation, state machines, etc., they're very, very similar. So what Angular Query is doing is trying to be very, very good at doing one single thing, one single responsibility, which is basically the data loading, data fetching, and yeah, synchronizing the server state into the client application so that we can display the data for the users. So yeah, thank you for the nice introduction. I'm not going to repeat after myself. I'm just gonna let you know that if you want to get in touch with me, I'm on Twitter, and I also started a YouTube channel currently with TypeScript so far. So feel free to reach out to me. So what is important when we're speaking about Angular Query is that we've got a couple of different topics. So I have already mentioned that there is the server state synchronization. So the key thing is that we should kind of differentiate what is the state of the client and what is the state of the server. The state of the client is, for instance, whatever the user could basically click through, what the user could type in using their keyboards. And the server state is basically what we fetch from the server. So Angular's query responsibility is only server state. So for instance, if you're considering tools like NGRX Signal Store or whatever you might have for your client state, they work together with Angular Query very, very nice. So use whatever you want to use for your client state, and Angular Query cares only about the server state. So what I mentioned before is that when we load the data from the server, that it could happen that by the time that we loaded the data could have already changed on the server. For instance, when there are more than more than one user, like in parallel or concurrently just changing the data. So the thing is, we might want to refresh the data, but also the thing is that when we like move into different tabs of our application, it could happen that, let's say I want to take a look at my, I don't know, employees tab or whatever, and I move to a different tab, which is projects tab. And when I move back to the employees tab after 5 minutes, after 10 minutes, the thing is my application could have the old data just to display for the user so that the user can see anything. And in the meantime, we're going to refresh the data because let's say that after 5 minutes that there could be a change to our data so that we would like to display what we've had so far. And in the meantime, we're going to reload it. So this is what is called stale while revalidate. So dealing with cache invalidation, dealing with the staleness of the data, dealing with stale data. This is also like, this is all built into Angular query. So this is really, really, really cool. So I'll probably skip the query cache, query client, query provider, etc., because this is just technical things that you do once for an application. You basically have one global provider that will hold all the data that you have cached, and that's it. So sometimes you interact with the query client, but it's only in some scenarios. So we'll have two key like topics here: queries and mutation. So I'll concentrate most of the times on the queries and then proceed to mutation. So basically, when you want to fetch the data from the server to our application, this is a query. When we want to modify something, this is a mutation. And you can think of it as in CQRS, command query responsibility separation, that query is basically query is the query. And mutation is a command. But the thing is, let's say if I have a small demo application over here. If I have loaded some of the data from the server, and this is basically a list of the data that we've got here, and here is already something that says authors list. This is a query key. Here we can see the details of the query. So this is something that I'll proceed in just a while. So if this is a list of items, basically an array of the JSON objects that I have downloaded, and I click the delete button over here, the thing is, I'm going to shoot HTTP delete back to the server. And what should happen, what happens is that the data that I have loaded here is already stale in a way, like I already know, my client application already knows that it's already stale because it includes an element that doesn't exist anymore at this point. So queries are just meant to load and cache the data for later displaying or using in any other way. And mutation is a way to update, modify, change, remove, invalidate the other queries. So if there is some relation between what we change, for instance, deleting an element, and what happens with the data that we've got here. So if you think about it closely, it doesn't really matter what tool are you using, whether it's, I don't know, NGXS, NGRX, Akita, whatever that's really is, Redux architecture or not Redux architecture. There is quite a bit of certain problems that we need to solve. And Angular query, as mentioned before, it's really tailored to to be very effective with it. So let me just proceed further. So this is just a very simple code that displays what does it feel like when using Angular query. So here on line 9, we've got some author service, whatever that is. It just provides some HTTP methods, like methods that execute HTTP requests. And the interesting part starts on line 10, which is inject query. So I believe you should think of a query as if it was a dependency. So for instance, we have a listing component, whatever that is, and if we have a query, think of it is that this component, in order to work properly, to exist, it needs to fetch the data from the outside. So we don't shoot the HTTP requests. We just say that, okay, this component depends on whatever we've got here in line 14. So basically, this is the author service get all authors. And this is on line 11. This is the key where we are going to store the data that we load. Because, of course, when we fetch the data, when we load the data and we cache it, we need to have some kind of a cache key, right? So it's just not called cache key, it's called query key. We're going to get back to it. So the thing is, if we cache all this data, whenever the component is being displayed, then the question is, like the Angular query needs to ask this question, like, do we have this data already or not? So what is basically doing is it's already taking a look at the query client, asking, hey, guy, do you have the authors, comma, details, comma, ID, the key? Do you have it? If you have it, then we're displaying it, and most probably we're also going to refetch it, because if it was downloaded like long enough, then we might need to reload it. Yeah, just for the sake of it. And if we didn't have it, then okay, we will let the view know that we don't have any value so far, but we're loading it right here, right now. So the thing is, there are lots of things going on under the hood, but this is like what you can see between the lines 10 and 15. This is all that we write. There is nothing more like of course there are more parameters, but this is most of the things that we do all the time. So we know what query key is. Basically, what is the key for the cache? Like, where can we find the data that we load? Query function is basically your HTTP client calls. So that's it. And there are two also more lines, stale time and GC time, GC for garbage collection. So basically, both are defined in milliseconds. So stale time is how much time need to pass after we consider this data that we have downloaded stale. And data being stale means basically that whenever we get back to a view, which means a component that depends on the data, a component that requires to use this data somehow, to consume it. So if the data is stale and somebody needs to use it, then what we're going to do is to refetch it in the background. Now, do we do it? No. Do we load the data? No. Do we refetch it? No. Do we reload it? No. Angular query is going to do it for us using the query function because it knows how to do it, and it also have very clear semantics when to do it. For instance, when stale time has passed. So stale time is one thing. Another thing is GC time. So consider a GC time in a way that how much time need to pass after which you consider this data is so old or so bad or like whatever that it's better to remove the data entirely. Just don't keep it within your application. And again, we don't have to remove it. We don't have to, update the data, etc., etc. All these things are going to take place automatically. And this is really, really, really cool. Inject query, like you don't see it from this code snippet. Inject query is something that you basically import. And what it does is, yeah, it uses inject under the hood from the library. So what inject query also does under the hood, and it's also, being handled using standard Angular destroy refs, etc., is that if we have a component which is called listing component, whatever the name is, and there is an inject query, Angular will basically track whether the component is live or not. So basically, whether this component is actively displayed in the view, and which is kind of standard, obvious. But Angular query is also going to track how many consumers, how many active consumers are there for this specific query key. So Angular query is going to track, like, is there anybody interested in this data at all? Or maybe there is nobody interested in this data. So by taking a look, who is actually, what are the consumers, we can actually see it over here. So what I'm showing here is just a very simple small application that shows just a listing and a little bit of the details that we have from the from one single object that is being loaded here. I'm just using the JSON placeholder created by Typicode. Just the famous and commonly used just mock API that requires real HTTP requests to be made. So what we have here, dear everybody, is that there is one query being made for the authors list. So these are the query keys. As you can see, a query key is just an array of strings or sometimes strings or objects. But the thing is, this is hierarchical. Oh, sorry. This is hierarchical. So let's say that we create a group, which is authors. So everything that relates to authors is being kind of grouped together. Then we have a list or we have a details. As you can see, we have details with ID 1. If I just increase whatever the ID is, we will have the ID 2, ID 3, ID 4, ID 5, etc. And basically using the hierarchy of the keys, I could basically grab all the keys that have authors as the prefix, as the first part, and update them, remove them, modify them, manipulate them if I want in any way. Or if I, for instance, wanted to find all the author details, or maybe author details with a very specific ID, whatever I need, we're going to get back there. So yeah, as you can see, I've been just fooling around a little bit with just moving along these IDs. So this is basically author ID 4 is basically Patricia Labzak, whatever. Like you can see that this is a really, really simple UI, but I just want to keep things simple. So we can see that there are 7 keys over here. So 6 keys for the details and 1 keys for the list. The number that you can see here on the left hand side is basically how many active consumers are there. You can think of the component as if it was a consumer, subscriber, whatever. Like not many RxJS, let's say, terminology is required here. But yeah, Angular query tracks who is interested in the data. And now we have some various states for our queries. And for instance, as you can see, that one used to be this dark orange over here, and it turned green when we displayed it. So now we need to wait a little bit of time. And this, dear everybody, a little bit of time is basically what is the stale time in this query. Now, I can't recall what was the exact value over here, so we can basically take a look at it. And we've got the author's details query and the author's details query. Oh, I made it stale time, which is 1 second multiplied by 60. So let's make it maybe 3 seconds just to make it quicker. I'll just make sure that Angular will rebuild the application. So this basically means that after 3 seconds, a given query is considered stale, so that we would have to so the data is considered stale. So again, let's increase the data, and yeah, if everything is okay, then the green turned to orange. And what that basically means is we can see that a fresh query basically means that the data is up to date and it's kind of fresh enough that we can consider it's like good enough. Now, if the data is kind of old-ish, we consider it stale. So it means that it's good to be displayed, though in the first chance we're going, like Angular query is going to reload it for us. And this is what I mentioned before, that's the stale while revalidate. So for instance, we've got the details 2, which is being displayed. What I'm going to do here right now is to move from Erwin Howell into Clementine Boch, and the stale query is going to remain stale. And when we get back, we will see Erwin Howell back again, but there is going to be a refresh in the background. So let's take a look. Inc, we can see that the ID3 has been loaded. And when we decrease over here, then we did see Erwin Howell, but we also could see that there is a request basically taking place in the background. So, yeah, like just a small thing. What I'm using here is the Angular Query DevTools. So I can not only see what are the queries that I have listed over here, but I can, and how many active consumers, the components are there, but I can also take a look, I can also kind of manually play with what is the state over here. So I could, if I have something that is basically fresh over here, I can invalidate it manually, or I can trigger the loading state, or I could trigger an error. So probably there are some things over here that I don't I don't handle in my template. So sorry if you cannot see kind of, oh yeah, this one is over here. If thus just this application didn't demonstrate all the things, but thanks to this abstraction, there is basically one abstraction that is important, is the query. Using the DevTools, we can basically fool around with them, change their state. We can see what is going on there. What is nice, dear everybody, the provider for the queries is a singleton. Like technically you could have more, but there is probably no need to use more. And yeah, we can basically drastically simplify what is going on in our application. So let's just take a look again at what we've got over here. The important thing is, how do we organize our queries? And yeah, and how do we configure, like most of the time you will want to configure what is the stale time. For instance, if you load, I don't know, a list of your bank transactions, probably after minute, there should be considered stale, more or less, because maybe there was a transaction during the minute, right? On the other hand, if you load a list of countries worldwide, I would say the stale time should be, I don't know, very, very, very long, at least 1 day, because they don't change every minute, they don't change every hour, they don't change, daily, etc. So basically, depending on what is the nature of your domain, of your data, you should configure stale data GC time accordingly. So there is also one thing, like I don't have, time to speak about all those interesting and cool features, and there is a lot of them. By the way, Angular Query is just a port of React Query, and generally speaking, Tanstack Query, which was extracted from React Query. And React Query has taken React ecosystem by storm, and lots and lots of applications, especially the new ones, are really like making great use of React Query, and I believe Angular Query is going to like share the same experience, and it's going to become like one of the major tools to handle data loading, because like there is a little bit of the topics to handle, and Angular Query is doing them very, very well. By the way, like all the concepts has already been battle tested in React. So if there was a silly idea, a stupid approach, something, basically a solution that didn't work very good, it has been already kind of battle tested in React. So this is just a React, Vue, Svelte, Solid.js, and probably some more ports. So the last thing I'm going to share with you, dear everybody, is how could we consider those keys to be hierarchical, and what does that actually mean? So imagine, dear everybody, that we have over here, so this authors list. Oh, there is one more thing. Sorry. When I move between the tabs, you can see, to everybody, that there are new requests popping up over here. This is, again, yet another nice thing, is that whenever there is a active tab, like we can listen to those events within the browser, Angular Query, React Query, etc. They also do it. So if there is a stale query over here, then they're going to reload it. So imagine how many topics you just don't think about because this is going to be handled for you. So the thing is that I wanted to say, the very last thing, is that we have a list of authors over here, and dear everybody, we've got 10 users, whatever they are. And if I delete one of the users, and again, yeah, let's just go back here to Leanne Graham. Now, we have the authors list, which includes the information about Leanne Graham, and we've got the authors details ID1 with Leanne Graham. Now, if I shoot HTTP delete, which I'm going to do right now, and that's it, you can see that the query has been deleted. Now, the query has been deleted, and this is because deleting is a mutation, and what we need to kind of think about is that how does a mutation affect existing queries? And in terms of a list, what we can do is basically mark the whole query as stale, which basically means invalidate queries. We can, so this is one thing, we can update the query, we can remove the query, etc., etc. However, as you could see when I removed Leanne Graham, now I'm going to remove Arena Howell. As you can see, here we've got the author details too. When I click delete, not only there is the HTTP delete, obviously, but yeah, there is probably author ID. Yeah, so this is the moment when things go wrong. I have probably clicked something wrong over here, so let's start again. Okay, after reload, the data is just clear over here. So yeah, after clicking deleting Engram. Okay. Oh, no, never mind. After clicking on the deleting of Leanne Graham, as you could see, the query got destroyed. So sorry for this clumsy demo. The thing is, Leanne Graham has been removed from the data of the query. Now I had to do that, like I had to say, like, what is the JSON that should be updated and basically what is the query. So the very last thing I'm going to do is basically to show the code that does the mutation. So there is the inject delete mutation. By the way, you can inject your mutations directly in your component if you want to encapsulate it so that your component becomes cleaner. What you can basically do is provide a function just to make it, you know, kind of very high level so that you can just see inject list query, inject details query, inject delete mutation so that it's easier to figure out what is going on over here. So if we take a look at the mutation, so when we destroy an author, like my bugs in this application are caused only by the fact that I do have just a pure signal with the author ID, and whenever my mutation takes place here, I just don't support what is going on with the signal and vice versa. So this is the only thing here. So anyway, what is going on within the mutation is I'm just going to shoot HTTP delete, and that's it. And when there is a success, what should I do with the queries? Shall I remove a query? Shall I modify the data of a query? So yeah, in terms of a very specific ID, and I know what is the ID over here. Of course, they are like async safe, they are parallel safe. So I could run multiple mutations. They're all going to have their respective callbacks. But the thing is, it doesn't make sense to keep the details of a certain author of a certain ID if that ID has been confirmed to be removed on the server. So we're entirely removing the thing from our local queries. However, if there is a whole list, then dear everybody, we're just going to filter it out. Why? Because we might have had more than one query of a list. So what we're just going to do here is if your list happened to has this certain object, it's just going to be removed, like filtered out, and that's it. What we could do also is, instead of manually updating the query data, we could invalidate the queries. And as you can see, what is going on over here, dear everybody, is that I could touch all the authors lists or this exact author details, or I could basically grab everything that starts with the user. And this is the query hierarchy, the query key hierarchy. So there is a lot of things that are possible over here. What is very nice is that this is very high level. This is highly declarative. It works very nice with RxJS, whatever you've got here in the observables. It also works very nice with signals. Don't have time to, speak more about that, but how we consume the data is also provided by a signal API. So I can see that there is quite a bit of questions over here. So that would be it from me. And yeah, thank you for listening very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was awesome. Yeah, tan stack is very hot right now. So yeah, we do have a few questions. So we have one says, does query function support observables or just promises?
At this point, it supports only promises, which you could see in the inject over here that we are dumping it into the promise, though, well, there is an ongoing effort to provide direct observable support in query functions, though, as for now, like most of the times, whenever we have like what I want to say here is that in 99%, roughly, this is not going to be an issue because when we shoot HTTP requests, this is going to be observable, which emits just one next notification anyway, right? So, right. So if we just, for now, we're just wrapping it with last value from. So if it just looks ugly for you, then yeah, I would say this is the biggest problem that maybe you could just dislike it, but there is no problem with it. There could be a problem if you had a method that emits more than one notification. Then yeah, but it's very often it's not the case. But yeah, like strictly speaking, yeah, you need to dump it into a promise. But this is being yeah, taken care of right now.
Awesome. Anthony asked, I guess this is kind of a best practices question. Should we have one query function per API endpoint?
Okay, that's a very good question. So depending, of course, on your logic, complexity, etc., I would say probably more than one, or maybe way more than one. So you can still see my screen. So imagine that we have here on this listing, we have filters, sorting, pagination, and you just don't have one filter. You have, plenty of different filters. And the thing is, those filters should become part of your key. So the original question is, should we have one query function per endpoint? Sorry, so
Yes. Mhm.
I'm correcting myself. Yes, that would be one-to-one, though, depending on what are the parameters of the data that you load, for instance, the page, the filters, etc., you might have multiple keys over here. So sorry for me messing up with the answer. Yes, one query function, but that could result in multiple keys, but that's still okay. For instance, if you filter, or sort by, ascending or descending, you could have different objects and different, indexes, which could affect where is your data. So yeah, one query, like most often, one query function per one endpoint, but multiple query keys.
Awesome. And then I'll have one more question for you, and then I'll let you go so you can get some sleep.
Sure.
Alejandro asks, do you have any information on when Angular query will move out of the experimental stage?
Yeah, so I can share some information with you. I'm opting like I'm in contact with Arnaud, the author of the port, and we're kind of on the two separate kind of places where I think that what we have here is already stable, and like there is not very big risk that things would change their APIs, though Arnaud tends to provide like make sure that there would be like very very little changes or even no breaking changes. So in practice, I don't think there would be any significant breaking changes in the current version, though it might still make some time until other issues are resolved. For instance, the lack of direct observables support. And the thing is, again, if we have an observable with multiple notifications, it's not about coding the thing. It's about what should we do with the thing? Like, what should the query do with a notification that emits multiple times? Like, there is no clear answer to some of the issues, because like most of JavaScript ecosystem relies on promises, most of it. Angular is probably the only one that relies on RxJS that heavily. And those issues do appear in Angular, while they didn't appear in probably most of the other frameworks or all of the other frameworks so far. So yeah, like the Arnaud, who is the author of Angular Query Port, like he prefers to have all these issues solved before. So it's difficult to say when this would be, but yeah, like my gut feeling is that there would be very little, if any, breaking changes in the API.